Okay, here we have 3-2 notes. This is the Pythagorean theorem. You've probably heard of this before. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we use this with right triangles only. So what that's saying is that the two legs, which they can be used interchangeably, this one could be called A and this one could be called B, it doesn't really matter. Those two squared added together must equal the largest side, which is called the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always across from the 90-degree angle. So we're going to use that formula to find the hypotenuse in these two problems. So we have this side, let's call it A, and this side, let's call it B. You could switch those up and it wouldn't matter, you'd still get the same answer. But we have 6 squared plus 13 squared equals c squared or x squared for your hypotenuse. Either letter will work. And then when we square these two numbers here, I would just use your calculator. The square root of 6 squared is 36, 13 squared is 169. But if you just put this whole thing right here into your calculator, then it'll give you 205, and that is fine. You don't have to show the steps in between that. Now we know what c squared is. We want to know what just c is, so we're going to take the square root. And this gives us approximately 14.32 meters for c. Now the reason we estimate these square roots is to help us make sure that our answers actually make sense. Because if we got, like, let's say 100 for our answer, that wouldn't make any sense with other side lengths being 6 and 13. So we need to make sure that our answer makes sense and that it's also bigger than the other two because we're finding the hypotenuse here, which is the largest side. So we're going to try again and find the hypotenuse here. So I'm going to call this one A and this one B. 5 squared plus 8 squared equals x squared, which gives us 89. The square root of 89 is approximately 9.43 feet. So that is what our hypotenuse is. Now on this next example here, we aren't finding the hypotenuse, but instead we are finding the missing leg. So let's call this one A. We could call it B. And then I'm going to call this one B. But this one has to be C because it's across from the right angle and it's the longest side. So we would get 15 squared equals 14 squared plus x squared, or a squared. Just make sure that you're putting these in the correct place. So we would get 225 equals 196 plus x squared. 29 equals x squared. Square root, so that x is approximately 5.39 inches. And same thing for this one over here, but I'll just call this one B this time, this one A, and then of course this one has to be C because it's our hypotenuse. So we have 9 squared equals 6 squared plus x squared. And then we're going to take the square root of both sides, so we get that x is approximately 6.71 inches. And that would make sense for this side length because it's not bigger than the hypotenuse, which is right in between those two. So now it's your turn to try. The hint is that one of these you're finding the hypotenuse, and the other one you are finding a leg. So pause this video and try those on your own and come back for the answers. So our first one here, we are finding a leg. So your equation should be set up like this. You should get that x is approximately 14.39 kilometers. On our next one, we are finding the hypotenuse. So your equation should look like this. And you should get that x is approximately 8.94 feet. Okay, so now we have some word problems. When doing word problems, you really need to think about what the problem is saying. Try to draw a picture, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So we have Blake, says Blake is out flying a kite, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and draw a person. This person here is flying a kite. He knows that the kite is 45 feet high and 30 feet away from him. So here's his kite that he is flying. And we know that the distance from the ground to where the kite is 45 feet. Because it's 45 feet high. Now, it's 30 feet away from him. This is kind of a disproportionate picture, but it's 30 feet away from him. So that is this distance. We want to know how much string did he let out. That's our hypotenuse. And we're going to solve for our hypotenuse. So we get that x is approximately 54 feet. And that's about how much string he left off. So it's your turn to try this one on your own. Take a second and pause it. And then come back to check your answer. The biggest thing I want to note on this problem here is that we are dealing with a ladder. If you think about it logically, you can't use a ladder if it's straight up against a wall. It's just going to probably fall over. You also can't use a ladder if it's laying on the ground because you're not going to get anywhere. So realistically, our ladder has to be the hypotenuse here. And we want to know how high it reaches. So your equation should have looked like this. And for x, you should get approximately 12.65 feet. Okay, now we have Pythagorean triples. Pythagorean triples are common triples that people in design or architecture, construction, they use all the time because these side lengths right here, 3, 4, 5, 5, 12, 13, it's always going to make a right triangle. And a perfect right triangle with no decimals. Like we had decimals up here, we had to calculate it. These numbers will always form one. So I'm going to cross out this sentence here. We don't need that one. But these triples can be multiplied to create larger triples. So like I said, we have a 3, 4, 5 triangle, right? If we have a triangle with side length 3, 4, 5, it will always make a triangle. And we can multiply these by any number and get another triple. So let's just say we're going to multiply it by 2. So we multiply every number by 2, and then we get 6, 8, 10. That's another Pythagorean triple. Or maybe we multiply them each by 10. Then we get 30, 40, 50, and that's another Pythagorean triple. So I'm just going to scroll back up here. Same with these ones in this box. So you could take 5, 12, 13, multiply every single one of those numbers by 2 or 10 or whatever. You're going to get more triples. Your job is to fill in these boxes using the Pythagorean theorem. And it tells you, for this one, you're going to solve for C. This one, you're going to solve for A or B, and A or B. So just take a second and try those, and I will put the answers up here on the screen for you. Alright, so that is all for our 3-2 notes.